What if I told you that Ferrari discovered something as subtle as an error in Hamilton's car? Something he had secretly running for several races without anyone noticing. Are we facing an exclusive development, which could redefine the performance of the SF25 car? Hungarian lights had turned off hours, and while most teams packed and analyzed routine data, in the Ferrari garage did not reign calm. There was no celebration or open frustration. What there was confusion. When overturning the telemetry of the SF25 car driven by Lewis Hamilton, some engineers detected something that immediately broke normality. It was not an obvious anomaly, it was not a critical alarm, but a set of dynamic patterns that did not coincide with what the simulations predicted. For a team like Ferrari, accustomed to polishing every microsecond, that mismatch, however, was enough to light an internal investigation. The SF25 rear train behavior showed an unusually constant load distribution in low-speed curves. The stability under braking was also superior to that expected. This did not make sense, until they disassembled part of the monocoque. There, hidden in a structural corner of the car, they discovered a slight geometric deviation in the lower fixing of the right rear strap. At first glance, he seemed identical to the standard piece, but his elastic response was different. This piece had been built with an almost imperceptible tolerance, a margin of flexibility that, within the legal framework, deeply modified the dynamics of the car on that axis. The most shocking thing was not to discover the piece, but the date of its implementation. That modification carried several races installed, and not in both cars. Only in the LH02 chassis, the car assigned to Lewis Hamilton. The question that arose immediately was as direct as uncomfortable. Why did you not have that development? Was it a controlled test? A secret experiment? Or perhaps a deliberately aimed at maximizing Hamilton's driving style? In Ferrari, official policy has always been the equality of technical treatment among its pilots. But this finding directly challenges that narrative. The most intriguing was that, until that moment, no one had officially informed of that internal deviation. Neither the simulator engineers had noticed it, nor on the track a radically different performance had been identified to get attention. And yet, Hamilton's car was rolling with a different structural behavior, adjusted precisely to generate more traction and less nervousness in conditions where the SF25 had been notoriously fragile during seasonal start. As the analysis deepened, it was discovered that several Hamilton car sensors also offered strange readings. Suspension potentiometers and accelerometers showed values outside the usual range. This did not indicate a failure, but an operational difference. The car responded to track forces in a different way to the base model. But perhaps the most disturbing thing was to verify that, despite these differences, general telemetry remained consistent. There were no mistakes. Only a car that behaved too stable for what theoretically was possible with the standard specification. And this is where the context becomes important. Lewis Hamilton, in just half a season with Ferrari, was getting a car more and more related to his style. A style that prioritizes the entry into curve under late braking with the planted rear axle, and a weight transfer that avoids sudden landslides. Just the characteristics that this modified piece seemed to facilitate. Ferrari found himself, without waiting for him, with a legal piece, but not communicated internally. A piece that had been unnoticed for weeks, influencing the benefits of one of its cars without full knowledge of the entire technical direction. A discovery that not only revealed a crack in the internal control of technical development, but also showed a possible change in the team's strategy. Are they beginning to adapt the car exclusively to 7-time world champion? That day in Hungary, Ferrari did not find an irregularity. He found an awkward truth. His car had been divided into two technical philosophies without anyone formally warning. And that fracture, although barely noticeable in the data, could have deep consequences in the internal dynamics of the team and in the competitive balance of the entire 2025 season. From the technical point of view, what Ferrari found in Hamilton's car is an advanced engineering example operating to the edge of the regulation. The piece in question, a fixation with elastic properties modified in the right rear strap, did not break any explicit norm. It was included in the development tokens package previously approved by the FIA, specifically in the approved suspension update window before the Austrian Grand Prix. Legal, yes. Transparent, not so much. The crucial thing here is not the existence of the piece, but the way in which it was introduced and the impact it generated on the structure of the car. Modern Formula One moves in margins of millimeters and hundredths of a second. Any alteration that modifies the behavior of the rear train alters not only the aerodynamic balance of the car, but also the interaction with the asphalt, the work of the tires, and the performance of the diffuser in real race conditions. The SF-25 has fought in 2025 against a persistent enemy, porpoising. That aerodynamic rebound that appears when the flat background of the car is close to the ground in high speed, making the airflow interrupted intermittently. This vertical vibration not only affects the stability of the car, but compromises the useful life of the pneumatics and fatigue the pilot. Well, that modified piece in the Hamilton chassis had a direct consequence. It extended the minimal height operating window before contact with the asphalt, stabilizing the diffuser in medium load areas and drastically reducing vertical oscillations. This improvement does not automatically translate into tenths by return, but it does allow a more aggressive setup. More aerodynamic load without penalizing both efficiency and line. More traction without sacrificing stability. Less need for extreme adjustments in shock absorbers or tire pressure. In other words, an easier car to refine, more consistent throughout a career stint, and with less variability in mixed conditions. Legally, the FIA approved the development file. But what Ferrari discovered was a dissociation within his own garage. Charles Leclerc, the other driver-pilot, did not have that piece. His car behaved differently, more rigid in the transition between braking and acceleration, more delicate in slow curves, and more prone to unequal rear tires. This reveals a technical inequality within the same team, and although it does not violate any regulations, it challenges the parity philosophy that Ferrari has defended publicly since the beginning of the Vasseur era. This point is key. Are we facing a legitimate and gradual development that, for logistical or experimental reasons, was only applied to Hamilton? Or is it a personalized evolution with the intention of adapting the SF-25 to the specific demands of its new star pilot, ignoring the technical symmetry with Leclerc? At a competitive level, the finding changes the board. Because while most teams seek uniformity among their cars, Ferrari seems to have entered a dynamic of selective evolution. One that, for now, benefits Hamilton. The team's reaction to this finding was discreet, but not passive. Internal engineering began to redirect resources to study the widespread implementation of this solution, not by conviction but by obligation. Because Leclerc, without that piece, could start falling behind in the fight for the championship. Beyond the technical and the legal, this episode exposes a fragility in communication and Ferrari's development management policy. Despite the technical discovery in Hamilton's car, the result on the track during the Hungary Grand Prix was anything but spectacular. Lewis ended in the 12th position, his worst result in the race without abandonment since Ferrari joined. Traffic stuck in a large part of Sunday, and with temperature problems in the front brakes, the British failed to convert the structural advantage of the SF-25 modified into valuable points. For superficial observers, it was a forgettable race. But within the team, it was the confirmation that something greater was happening under the surface. Hamilton's performance did not reflect the magnitude of change. The modified piece was not a direct improvement in time per return, but a consistency facilitator. An invisible tool to keep the car in a more stable operational window throughout the stint. In other words, the real benefit was not in the explosiveness of performance, but in its sustainability. In ideal conditions such as clean air, moderate temperatures, and optimal tire management, that advantage would have been much more evident. Hungary, with its locking design and the lack of opportunities to advance, simply not offered the necessary environment to show that potential. This apparently technical incident could mark the beginning of a structural transition within the team. For the first time in years, Ferrari seems to be considering the possibility of evolving his car around a single pilot. And while that may seem logical from the competitive point of view, especially with a 7 titles champion in their ranks, it is not something that fits well with the recent history of the team or with the technical equality policy that has been defended as a sacred rule since post-Schumacher days. The implications are huge. It is not simply pieces or adjustments. It is about identity, technical leadership, and how Ferrari will define his philosophy in a season where the title is more open than ever. And it all started by a suspension fixation that almost goes unnoticed. What began as a simple technical review after the Hungary Grand Prix has ended up exposing an awkward truth. Modern engineering in Formula One not only defines speed, but also internal policies and balances of power. The finding in Hamilton's car goes far beyond a punctual improvement. It is a symptom of something deeper, the natural or perhaps strategic evolution of Ferrari towards a development philosophy focused on a single pilot. In addition, this case introduces a new psychological dimension within the championship. The perception of technical favoritism. When a pilot feels that the team is building the car for the other, even if it is indirectly, the impact is not only on track performance, but on communication, morality, and in the predisposition to work together. What is earned in technical performance can be lost in human cohesion. What happened in Hungary with Hamilton's SF25 could be remembered within a few months as a silent turning point. A time when Ferrari, without announcing it, began to redraw his internal priorities.